Lindsey German, convenor of the Stop the War Coalition. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for accepting the interview today.
Well, it's very good to be here, as it always is. So thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. So let's start with the Abdullah Ocalan situation. He has been held in isolation in prison for 23 years now. He has been denied visits from his family and lawyers. There are now concerns about Öcalan's health and whereabouts. Can you comment on this, first of all, about this treatment, first of all?
Well, it's appalling treatment of Ocalan, and it's something that has been going on for a very, very long time. There's no justification for it. We have in this country and in the United States and a whole number of other countries, we have this sort of ideology of human rights, but it's very, very selective about how it deals with human rights. In the case of Öcalan and the case of the Kurds more generally, I'm afraid that our government and various other governments have allowed the Turkish government to behave in this way. And it's a very basic question of human rights that he should be released. He shouldn't be treated in this kind of way. It's not just affecting his civil liberties, but it's obviously also will affect his health and well-being. And there's absolutely no justification for it. So I'm very much in favor of him being released.
Thank you. What is the importance of freedom of Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan and delisting the PKK from forbidden organizations list? As many people are saying, keeping the PKK in forbidden organizations list and keeping Mr. Abdullah Öcalan under isolation is two different faces of the same coin. How would you going to evaluate that?
Well, the banning of the PKK and the designation of it as a terrorist organization is again something which is very, very loaded politically, because what effectively they're saying is that people who are fighting for their national rights and who are fighting for the liberation of their own country, and there is a very long tradition of this happening in different parts of the world, from Ireland to India, they're saying they don't have the right to do this, and this is completely wrong. And I think that it's one of the big issues still in, if you want to call it international politics, international relations, that the Kurds were denied their own homeland, more than 100 years ago now, and this wrong ought to be rectified.
Thank you. What was the target by taking Mr. Öcalan as a hostage with the February 15 international conspiracy?
Well, Öcalan, as I understand it, wanted to be able to defend himself against charges of terrorism and to give reasons why the Kurdish struggle has continued and is continuing. And he was prevented from doing so because that would mean him going to Amsterdam and him being able to speak about this. Instead, he was tried in Turkey, and we know what the result of that was. Initially, a death penalty, and since then, incarceration for these so many years. And that was obviously an attempt to prevent a wider dissemination of the story of not just Öcalan, but of the Kurds and the PKK reaching a wider audience, is what it seems to me.
This conspiracy has also driven the Kurdish issue to an insoluble state. How do you evaluate the isolation on Öcalan? How would you comment the approach of the EU and the ECHR in that case?
Well, the EU likes to present itself as a liberal human rights organization, but I'm afraid that in this case, and you could say the same about a number of other cases, it's very far from the case. And if you care about human rights, you should be shouting that Öcalan should be free, that he shouldn't have been in prison for 23 years. And unfortunately, the EHRC and the EU itself are doing nothing of the sort. And if you look at this, the reason for this is to do with much bigger political alliances, and particularly the importance for them with Turkey, both as a member of NATO, but also in recent years playing a role in kind of managing the refugee crisis for the European Union. And it's a fairly shameful episode if you look at it.
You already mentioned that the EU should look after the human rights that they're talking about. So Turkey is getting more and more repressive in its treatments of the Kurds. This must have bearing on how Western allies view the Kurds. What can we do to shame our governments into acting in favor of the values of human rights and justice that they claim to uphold?
Well, I think what's important for us to do in countries like Britain is to try to highlight the case of the Kurds, is to try to highlight human rights abuses. There are many institutions which supposedly are dedicated to doing this sort of thing, but don't really do it. So I think it's up to those of us who campaign around different issues. Obviously, we do that in Stop the War, and we've always supported, and we've always had lots of support from the Kurdish community and from Kurdish organizations. It's up to us to try to make this as widely known as possible, because as you say, the Turkish repression is getting worse. The situation of the Kurds, who fought very, very bravely in recent years over the question of ISIS and a number of other things, really needs to be addressed much more seriously. And it's something that I feel there should be so much more of it as part of the political narrative in this country, and that simply isn't the case. So this government's very selective about the human rights that it supports, and very selective about which countries it shines a spotlight on.
Your comments always and your evaluation is always to the point about the EU. So I would like to ask you that as well. The European Committee on Torture has criticized the treatment of Abdullah Öcalan by Turkish authorities. Do you think that there is a willingness and ability in Europe and its constitutions to intervene with the Turkish government to address the treatment of Mr. Öcalan?
Unfortunately, I think it will be very limited, because the Committee on Torture has criticised some of these things. But what you find when you go any further with these things is you find that you reach, you get blocked, and you get blocked by the politics of the international alliances. And while the EU may have many criticisms of Turkey, and probably does have criticisms of Turkey, and doesn't want Turkey to join the European Union, it will not, in my opinion, really stand up to what Turkey is doing, and would rather not have this as a major item of politics, but instead keep it to reports from committees rather than taking it onto the main political arena.
Lastly, can we get your expectation for Öcalan and the message for the Kurdish people?
Well, my message to the Kurdish people is that you've fought very, very bravely over a whole number of issues for many, many years. This is about the right of the Kurdish people to have their own autonomy, to have their own ability to organize and to be politically represented, their ability to speak their own language, and a whole number of other issues that are very, very important. And I hope very much, and I'm certain that you will continue in this struggle. And if it wasn't for that struggle, people in Britain wouldn't know hardly anything about the Kurds and the situation in the Middle East, whereas far more people have become aware of it in recent years. And I think the focus on Öcalan is important, because it's about saying that he's a figurehead. He's an important political figure in the Kurdish movement. He's the best known political figure in the Kurdish movement. To keep him in prison in these intolerable conditions should not be allowed. So I think the message is, let's keep campaigning, let's keep organising, and let's fight in every way that we can for his release.
Dear Lindsey German, convener of the Stop the War Coalition, thanks for joining us. Thank you for your valuable comments today.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.